Bob Cooney here with another of the infrequent Being Virtual Show deep dives. This is kind of an ad hoc one that I wanted to put together. I've got two people that I really admire that I've watched and known one for a very long time, Lance Loesberg and Jeremy Dalton. So thanks for joining me on this one, guys. Lance, why don't you give us just a quick background? How did you and I meet, and what have you been working on for the last 30 years?
I was 4 years old, Bob. I think you were too, like 5 or something. Yeah, man, it's been a long journey, quite a bit. But I started like in the early 90s. I think that's when we probably met in the early to mid 90s when I got into the virtual reality with a company called Virtuality. And I was running their North American offices based in Dallas. And we were selling those pods, if you remember, the VR pods with the clunky headsets and a handful of games, whatever. And you were running the laser tag business. And I remember actually coming up to Denver when you were there and meeting with you. And I think that was one of the first early meetings. I honestly can't remember if it was mid 90s or early 90s or late 90s at the time. But we kind of would cross paths, along the way. And it was your interest in the VR space and, adding as an attraction to your laser tag business. And it kind of ran parallel for a while.
Or did you work for Virtuality for Waldron?
Yes, Virtuality Waldron. Right.
Interesting. Because Horizon had acquired the distribution rights, and that was owned by George McCall, or run by George McCall, owned by Edison Brothers. I did like the 4th annual kind of breakfast meeting that George and his son Howard host at IAPA.
Oh, really?
Because they run an entertainment, they run a consultancy now called Pinnacle Entertainment, and they consult for a lot of movie theater chains that are implementing amusements and FECs, and that's kind of one of the things we'll touch on. But I didn't realize, I thought you worked for Horizon. I didn't remember, it was a long time ago, that you were working directly for Waldron and Virtuality.
Fortunately and unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah, and Edison Brothers opened Laser Storm Virtuality arcades together in malls, right. North Pier, Union Station in St. Louis, Exhilarama in New Jersey. And so in the early 90s, we had VR laser tag arcades like 93, 94. I think it was in that time, and so far ahead of its time. And so you went from VR to then you got into domes and projection and 360 video. And so what have you been doing since then?
A little bit of everything. It went from the gaming aspect to more experiential. 88, 89, getting my years mixed up here. Now,
a long time ago.
So it came up to the big launch was approached by General Motors ad agency, where they wanted to create a virtual reality test drive with a former Masters golf champion in the back seat. And at the time, they said, we don't want animation. We don't want cartoons, as they called it. We want it to be real, but we want this 360-degree world. And it hadn't been done yet. So I sat down with our guys. We're very tech savvy, plus some software engineers that kind of knew what was going on from the VR side and animation. And we theorized that we could figure a way to shoot a 360 panoramic video and create this experience with real people. And they said, okay, let's do it. And I said, okay, we got to figure this out. We pulled it off. We delivered it. What they did is they outfitted 3 tractor trailers that traveled around the country and took actual car seats in the trailer, like a theater style. And we had built like our own headsets. We actually used scent of smell and vibration in the seats. And we outfitted everything under the seats. And they toured the country and tracked people who actually took the virtual reality test drive, went to a dealership and bought a car. And it was so successful, they renewed it for 5 years.
Wow. And
that kind of launched this whole promotional aspect of the technology. And that led to another one for Pennzoil with Jay Leno and led to just other ones, and then kind of morphed into more different areas of utilizing the technology for different purposes.
Yeah, wow. So you were one of the first to really commercialize this in a way that it made sense for people. Yeah. Jeremy.
Hey, Bob.
For anybody that
good to see you.
Doesn't know, give us a quick, your background and what are you doing now?
So I'm the relative new kid on the block compared to you guys. I mean, I've my story only begins about 13 years ago versus 30 years ago. And this is when I joined PwC. Nothing to do with virtual reality or augmented reality. I was actually I was an auditor. I was a business recovery consultant, so dealing with the shutdown of Lehman Brothers in the UK. Completely different world to what I soon entered. But I realized very quickly into my tenure at PwC that I wanted to be involved in the emerging technology industry. And so I managed to maneuver my way in there. But I found myself, I found it really difficult to keep in touch with all of these different emerging technologies, and I wanted to develop an expertise in one particular area. Virtual reality and augmented reality, immersive, stood out to me because probably similar to the experiences that you and Lance have had, I found it to be such an experiential, visceral, unique technology and experience that I thought, there's some real potential here, not just in the consumer world, but in the business world that PwC operates in. It took me about 5 years of campaigning, of bringing in client projects, working with different companies in different industries, showing them the value of VR in business, until they finally opened the door and said, "Okay, Jeremy, your full-time job now is to grow and lead PwC's first dedicated immersive team." We deployed tens of thousands of headsets all over the world, over 50 countries, to companies in every industry. We built software. We used 360 video. We used volumetric capture. We used computer-generated imagery, Unity, Unreal, mobile phones, computers, domes, you name it. We've deployed it all, and it's been a hell of a journey. I left PwC in February 2025, and since then I've been building out my own practice. And one of the things or the platforms that I'm releasing to the public is called XRHQ, and this is a free to access platform to give people an idea of what is going on in the world. So it uses artificial intelligence to scan the internet 24/7 to see what organizations are actually doing with these technologies, because I saw a lot of talk, a lot of thought leadership out there about what this can do, where we're going in the future, prototypes about this and that. There are people that are generating results, real business return on investment right now with this tech, and that's what I'm excited to communicate to people.
That's a great segue. Thank you for that. I couldn't have paid for a better one. So the gaming industry recently has just gotten kind of gutted. As if you're following it, lots of layoffs and studio shutdowns, not just VR, but mainstream gaming. And people's tastes seem to really, post-pandemic, have shifted in ways that are dramatic and fast around what they're looking for, free-to-play versus AAA in the gaming space, and large premium format and immersive theater versus, what we would call traditional cinema. I want to kind of talk about where XR technology is today, like practically, like who's using it, how are they using it, how is it working, but where is it today? Why does it matter? And why maybe they need to take another look at it if they're burned out by it. And what led to this whole conversation was I saw you guys online had gone to Cosm, and maybe that's where we start, and had done The Matrix, right?
Right.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
And so that was produced by a company in the UK, I think, Little Cinema. Are they in the UK? I think they are, Little Cinema. They've done a lot of immersive theater stuff over the years, and they created a Cosm half-dome version of The Matrix. They've since announced, and I think they might have even launched Willy Wonka, the original with Gene Wilder, and then they announced they're going to do the very first Harry Potter movie. And so maybe, Lance, since you're the dome expert, start out with, for people who aren't aware of it, what is Cosm and how would you describe it to people?
A planetarium on steroids, maybe. It's basically, it's a planetarium, turned on its side, so to speak. And it probably about 180 degrees, like a fisheye lens would be, project. Maybe a tad more, maybe like 220, I guess, that you're immersed in. And it also depends on where you're sitting, right? How that perspective is going to be. extremely high fidelity, very much, resolution is fantastic. Great sound system, so the audio is great. There's not any other. Well, I think I've seen somewhere we didn't have anything where they had like confetti coming down or something after a celebration, but there's no wind effects, there's no vibration effects or scent, smell kind of things. And it's kind of like an IMAX or more of a wraparound IMAX. I think is the way I'd probably best describe
Yeah,
it.
it's a great description. When you talked about the resolution, you mentioned it, but how much horsepower do they have to not only project that stuff, but then also like the creation of that content? Like, how big do you imagine the files are? We'll talk about the sphere as the next level of that too, right? But you got to create like special, development pipeline, production pipelines for that shit, right?
Yeah, they're kind of secretive. I think maybe it's proprietary, but they do have like these LED panels that are all throughout the whole thing. I don't know, thousands of these LED panels that make up the screen. And we actually talked to them, a while back when they started, before they even opened the location here in Texas, about creating content for them. But they were secretive about not only the projection and resolution and those kind of specifications, but also the type of camera rig. The rig that we've seen that they've used is really big. So it's you have to take that in consideration when it comes down to parallax and things like that.
Yeah.
They also, for like even the Matrix, was different because they basically just took a equirectangular screen, right? Just a big screen, kind of like an IMAX screen you would see, and then they utilized special effects all around that window or that screen itself to kind of make it seem like it was bigger than it really was.
So it's the same like LED wall stuff that you see now if you go to a trade show on these giant screens. Right. It's basically that LED tech that has gotten really affordable over the last few years, it seems, because I see it everywhere.
Yeah, the sphere is using the same type of technology, I believe.
Interesting. So it's not actually projection.
I think it's interesting to think about the content as well that they've produced, because although they don't produce custom content for every single different scene in the Matrix, we saw quite a lot of different content being produced for different scenes. They must have spent a lot of time and a lot of money creating the content, as Lance was saying, around that rectangular view of the actual film itself. And not only is it static content, so in some cases you've got animated effects. So if you're on the Nebuchadnezzar and it's being invaded by the squids, you're getting sparks flying from the top left and top right corners when Neo or Mr. Anderson, more appropriately at the time, is trying to escape from the agents, and he's on the tower building and he's grasping his mobile phone and he's holding on to the edge of the building, and Morpheus is giving him the instructions. He drops his mobile phone. That famous scene where you see the mobile in slow motion fall to the ground, and there's this sense of vertigo. At that point, I remember very vividly the effect being that they had this content of skyscrapers all around you, and they twisted it to make it feel like you were starting to lean over the building to look down onto the ground. So it induced a sense of, at least for me, minor vertigo, comfortable vertigo, enough to get me a little bit, worried or nervous, but in a fun way, just like you would have in an amusement park ride.
And they're charging, I want to say, $50-$60 a ticket, or maybe it was less than that. But by the time you buy a drink,
it's a range.
Yeah,
it depends on where you're seating. So they have different seats at different prices. If I remember correctly, the range was from about $35 to $65, something like that. And the cheapest seats were right on the edges where you don't get the full immersion. The most expensive seats are in the middle tier. So it's kind of like a theater where you've got the ground floor, the middle floor, and then the top floor.
And the thing I find interesting, and obviously they have a big whole F&B menu on top of that, and the food's not bad. The drinks, they had the Matrix Red and the blue pill, the red pill, which were $15, $16, $17 a drink. And so I know they have Dallas, they have LA. They were building Atlanta and they've announced Detroit. It's hard for me to imagine how that pencils with only a handful of venues if the production cost is really that high. Now they're leveraging a mainstream blockbuster movie with star power, and they're probably, so they're leveraging that production cost, which is sunk cost for 25 years. But, I gotta believe that, and seats, I want to say the capacity is for the whole venue is about 800, but not all of that is, they can't fit that many in the dome, can they? Do you know?
I don't know what you remember, Lance, but it was definitely not 800, even across the 3 floors.
And they're not like most of the seating is like communal or like tables like you'd have at a restaurant
or a dine-in theater like the
sort of sofa style almost.
They're trying. What their intent is too, Bob, is to be able to utilize the facility not just for like a marquee event or that like the Matrix in this case, but utilize it almost daily. Also, like even for maybe a field trip for school kids, right? And so they just have content that'd be appropriate for that kind of thing.
Well, a lot of their content is sports, right? So they've done deals with the NFL and NCAA and MLB and NBA, and so they have. We saw a playoffs, a Clippers Nuggets game. We sat right on the floor just to see what it would be like, and the players were 12 feet tall, and it was as good as any basketball experience I've ever had live. But the cost of that content has got to be outrageous. All of it. So the idea that they're taking this infrastructure that they've spent, I think it's 80 million is what roughly it costs to build a Cosm venue, and so they've got to fill that up 24, like as close to 24/7 as you can,
right,
to get your money out of it.
Yeah, it's got to be a long-term play. I mean, there's no way they're going to get a return at any time.
But it seems to be like on the surface, Jeremy. You've been behind the scenes of a lot of these things. I always caution people when they're looking at a new business model. People assume that just because it exists, it's working and it's making money. Any thoughts or prognosis on the ability for that thing to actually scale into 50 or 100 major markets and become kind of like a standard entertainment play?
I look at an older project, ABBA Voyage. Have you ever been to ABBA Voyage, Bob? Yeah. Lance, what about you?
No, I have not. No.
Oh, I would highly recommend it. It's truly amazing that you can get an audience so excited about a completely simulated concert, and get people up, out of their seats, dancing to performers that are on stage that are completely virtual. Somehow people know it's obviously virtual, but they're still able to put that to one side in their minds and have a great time. ABBA Voyage production costs on that were about $175 million. It was an insane amount of money, and that's been running for a good couple of years now. And the last thing I heard is that it's certainly broken even and starting to make some money, I believe. So and it's a different model to Cosm, don't get me wrong, but at a higher level, the idea of creating such an immersive, unique experience that you have to go out of home to obtain, whether that is pure concert in a dedicated venue or in a multifunctional venue like Cosm, where you're not only playing modified immersive films like The Matrix, but also, as you mentioned, Cirque du Soleil performances, live streamed NFL games. From my perspective, it is a proven model. It's just that we're playing around with new technology and new ways of making that experience happen.
Yeah, I think one of the things about ABBA Voyage that blew me away was, I believe it's rear projection. I don't think they're using LED. The resolution was, do you know if they're using LED technology?
I don't know. It just looked, I couldn't tell.
And there's one scene where the band is playing, they recreated them in avatars. They did live motion capture to create them, in ping pong ball suits and then put them in their younger selves. And they were on the stage, and there were all of these lighting rigs lighting them. And it took me a while to realize that the lighting rigs were part of the projection. Like, it was so realistic, it was so three-dimensional, that I had trouble telling what was real and what was virtual on the screen. And what it turned out was everything was virtual. There was nothing was real. And then at one point they dropped these little lights out over the audience that added a sense of depth that were real. Why do you think they're keeping that just in London?
Yeah, I wouldn't know, to be honest. Because it seems like if that model is profitable, then why wouldn't it go to Vegas and other places like that?
Because you got 170 million sunk cost in the content. The theater didn't cost that much to build.
Yeah, exactly.
And then let's talk about the spheres. Have you done the sphere yet, either of you?
When I was there, it was like 2 weeks before they opened. It was the last time I was in Vegas.
Yeah.
I definitely would highly recommend it.
I'll be back soon.
Yeah. It's a lot of, I would say it's the most immersive experience I've had outside of a headset. That's my conclusion, and I haven't had a more immersive one to date. Cosm, of course, was a halfway house towards that, somewhere in the middle. But the Sphere has done a really good job at putting you into that content and making you feel part of it.
What content did you see when you were there?
I saw a film that was created specially for the Sphere about the future of planet Earth, and I can't remember what they called it.
Yeah, Postcards from Earth by Darren Aronofsky. Yeah.
Yes, Postcards from Earth. That's it. Yes. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that story. I enjoyed the immersive nature on it. I was able to truly get lost in that content.
And now they've done The Wizard of Oz, but they have to pay the performers a lot of money, and so from a business model standpoint, taking classic films, Wizard of Oz, one of the most iconic films of all time, it seems to be doing really well and generally getting positive reviews. And so now you've got the Cosm with The Matrix and Willy Wonka and now Harry Potter, and you have Wizard of Oz. By the way, all Warner Brothers films, which I find interesting, are now being reimagined for these big immersive, dome or semi-dome venues. Any thoughts on why Warner seems to be the driving force with all of this stuff?
I don't know so much about Warner, but to me, it's content is still king. And if it was great 50 years ago, why wouldn't it be great today? The more you can immerse people into it, the better chance you have of it being a pleasing experience, and people want to see it and come back.
Yeah, and I guess you're tapping into a nostalgic audience who has more money, and you're not rolling the roulette wheel of is it going to hit or not when you take a movie that's got proven it's got decades worth of leg. And so IMAX, so movie theaters have been in, what I've described as a terminal death spiral for 20 years now. Every year seems to be less than the year before. IMAX, and specifically IMAX, is killing it. So I've read a statistic that 40% of the opening weekend box office for tentpole films like Mission Impossible, for example, are generated in 2% of the screens globally on IMAX. People are willing to pay extra money for something that's more immersive. In IMAX, if you go to their website, it's like the most immersive movie experience you can have. They're all in on immersive. 18% of the screens in America, so that's 5,000 cinema auditoriums, are generating almost no revenue for the cinemas. We've got 5,000 underutilized movie theaters. We've got all this new technology that's coming out that's immersive, that people are showing they're willing to spend top dollar for. How do we connect the dots there? Because it feels like a big opportunity, but I'm not seeing any movement in it.
I think the movie industry needs to start thinking about and start acknowledging the need for greater immersion. Part of the reason, or the significant part of why they go to cinemas, is to be immersed in a different world through the medium of film. And regular cinema screens just aren't doing it now. When you have experiences like the Sphere, like Cosm in the world, that are giving consumers that true state of immersion, or our current generation of immersion, that has moved expectations up a notch to the point where we're now seeing, less and less numbers go towards traditional cinema, because the difference between that and watching that film at home is narrowing and narrowing, not necessarily from a technology perspective, but from a consumer perception perspective. It's all being bundled slowly and slowly and being compressed into the same sort of experience, plus or minus 10-20% as far as consumers see it. And then in a separate category are the truly immersive experiences of Cosm and the Sphere and ABBA Voyage and so on. So I think we're in a natural evolution where if the film industry or the cinema industry doesn't do something, they're going to find themselves out of business, and moving them from regular cinema to IMAX. And then maybe the next stage is from IMAX to half dome, and then full dome or a larger dome experience. And I think that's the direction it's got to go in.
You mentioned the creative and the profit, but there's also the audience there too, right? And so we've got, and look, this is, we're in a capitalist system, for better, for worse, wherever you fall on that. So profit is going to be the driver. And with the studios, the studios are clearly, with streaming, and they're pushing hard into that. They've broken the exclusive distribution window now for cinemas, has pretty much been thrown out the window, no pun intended. And so, I think there's, and I've gone to CinemaCon a few times. I don't know if any of you have ever gone to CinemaCon. It's a great experience. CinemaCon is the annual convention in Las Vegas where all the cinema owners come together, and the studios get up on stage and they unveil the slate for the next year. And they show special previews. They bring the stars on stage and the directors to talk about the film. It's a love fest between the cinemas and the cinema owners. And maybe Orgy is a better example, because I'm not sure how much love there is anymore there. Because the cinemas, the studios have basically said, we actually, they sit there and they say, we love cinema. We think shared experience is amazing. Cinema is the best way to watch a movie, yet they continue to narrow the windows and send stuff directly to the TV. And so I think that there's a break in this in the channel that's obvious, but you talk about the cinema owners having to do it. The cinema owners don't have control of content, right? So they're the tail being wagged by the dog of the studios, and the studios are saying, "Screw this! We're just going home with this content," And maybe they're blaming it on consumers, or saying customers aren't coming out to watch anything other than these big tent poles. How many of those can we make a year? And so if it's a comedy, if it's a drama, like the only thing that seems to have a chance of working in theaters these days is horror and, big action movies. And anything else is going to direct to video. And so I feel like there's almost got to be a realignment of the ecosystem between the studios and the cinema owners and the content creators, because, it's that whole thing is just broken.
If the model is broken, would we end up in a situation where the film producers continue to produce content in the format they're used to, and there is created a secondary or intermediary industry like Lance and I saw at Cosm, whereby companies take that medium and expand it with their own creativity and own creative license to the dome or semi-dome format, thus giving audiences or that segment of audience a more immersive experience in those venues that are able to support that? Perhaps that is a future. I don't know what you think, Lance and Bob.
Are you talking about creating content using a widescreen, 180 degree, 270, whatever content, and then also using that same content for a traditional screen?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's from a creative standpoint and from just shooting at that content, creating that content, and you can do it in animation probably a lot better, but on film, it's.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't mean expanding the whole thing for both, but I mean, how there was a company that made the external outside the matrix film. There were all the effects around that dome. If we had a bunch of companies that are all producing creative versions of that extra content to fill an immersive dome-like experience, would that be a potential future?
Yeah, I mean, even from my understanding, when the Sphere when they created the Wizard of Oz experience that you're going to see, Bob. They actually took some of the existing the native footage, and because the camera captures more than just this, they were able to use AI and regenerate outside those scenes to give you that wider perspective, to do that. And they also then recreated some scenes as well.
Yeah, that was the controversy, is they created scenes that were never captured, but they had to imagine what might have been beyond the lens, right?
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I think the answer, Jeremy, is yeah. I think that's a possibility for sure.
I think if I can jump in, I do think that if you look at the history of IMAX started with documentary films, right? And then they re-released Apollo 13, Ron Howard's film, in IMAX. Was the first big Hollywood movie to be released in IMAX a couple of years after it was first released in the box office. And then a couple of years later, they did a day and date release of a film. I can't remember what it was. And now they've got 40 new films 20 years later, 25 years later being released day and date with IMAX. And I wonder if you won't see the same thing as more Cosms get built, where they will do Little Cinema and other companies like that do the effects outside of it, might not do a Cosmization of, like they do with IMAX, and you can go see it in Cosm, you can go see it IMAX, or you can see it on your TV, and maybe there's a couple of theaters left. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're as you can see, I'm in a studio, so we produce content in studios too. And the thing is that if we're going to be producing something, then we have to look at what the return is and the distribution capabilities of that. So if there's not enough screens out there, that's why I think it has to be a long-term play, because they need more venues out there to optimize the content that they're going to purchase or create.
So let's talk about virtual reality. So Doug Liman, who's the director of Edge of Tomorrow, he's done a couple of Tom Cruise movies, and he just did a movie called Asteroid, and it's a short film that's going to be launching with the new Google Samsung headset. And he said that it's by far the hardest thing he's ever shot in his life. And so this movie is about five amateur astronauts who go in a capsule together up to mine an asteroid to try to recover all of these minerals, then become trillionaires. And the whole thing is shot inside this capsule. And he talks about how hard it was to shoot that for virtual reality. And I don't know if you've seen the Periscope film on Apple Vision Pro, same thing. Real tight shots inside a submarine, first-person view. And I really question whether that medium, which you've got great filmmakers starting to develop best practices for a whole new medium, right? So it's going to take some time. If those could even ever translate to, big screens and big domes, because I don't know that I want to see 100-foot face of Matt Damon, right, on a screen, but in a VR headset, because of that proximity, the size works. And I'm just fascinated to see where this goes, and then how it leads itself to new distribution windows and distribution channels as we have this content that's designed for different formats, and how that scales as a business. I think there's going to be a huge distribution challenge at some point.
Yeah, I think you're right on spot, Bob, as far as that goes, because it's the techniques to shoot, especially close proximity in a 360 world. It takes that guy should have called me years ago to produce that. We could have helped him, but it takes a lot of different nuances and really just through experience you learn the techniques. But yeah, you're exactly right. Where in a headset, the perspective is one way. If you're projecting a big dome or something, things are going to look giant or out of proportion. So there are ways of doing it, right? But it's not like one size fits all. You have to know the format you're delivering on in the production that you're doing to produce for that particular format.
So have either of you guys done this experience called Horizons of Khufu?
Yeah.
You've done it, Jeremy. So Lance, for your perspective, so there's this new, you were asking me before we started recording about VR technology and how it's, when Lance and I first did virtuality, Jeremy, we used to measure latency in seconds instead of milliseconds. Like literally, you turn your head and you'd wait for the scene to catch up for you. Like 1001,
That must have been a
1002,
rough time.
1003.
Rough time, Bob.
If you didn't get sick first.
It was terrible.
I feel sorry for the QA testers. That's all I can say.
It was horrible and amazing at the same time. And over the years, with the a lot of location-based VR, early adopters for tech that really wasn't designed for location-based entertainment. It wasn't designed to be high usage, high throughput, high volume, people dropping it, teenagers running it. And so there were reliability issues and usability issues and throughput issues. But over the last couple of years, those things have been solved. Like the all-in-one headsets, the chipsets have gotten good enough. The new Pico 4 Ultra Enterprise, with the XR2 Plus, whatever the naming convention is, that chipset's really good. It's really reliable. It's designed with LBE in mind. HTC has a Focus Vision headset that's been out now for several years that works really well. No external tracking, no cables. All you literally do is you put on the headset and you're in an experience. And so a company out of France called, used to be called Immersive, they're now called Excurio, created this ancient Egyptian experience in 10,000 square feet for 100 people at a time. And it's a walkthrough experience. You put on a headset, you spend 45 minutes walking around this experience, and next person comes in, next person comes in, next person comes in, and they leave. Like a haunted house maze almost, right? People come in and people go out. So you could put thousands of people a day through this experience. They charge $30-40 per person. It's been running now for 3.5 years. They just announced a new location in China. It's mostly touring. It runs for 6 months to a year in each location. It's done almost $30 million in ticket sales. And all you need to deploy it is a bunch of markers on the walls and some $700 headsets, or $1,000 if you're on Focus. So you're talking about less than $100,000 worth of CapEx to generate, a couple of thousand people a day at $30 a ticket. The economics of that is, and you can run it with a handful of people because you're just giving out headsets and wiping down headsets. So the economics of that business work. A company I've done some work with, Universe out of Barcelona, is doing a Black Mirror experience, 45 minutes with Banijay. They're going to open that in London in Q1. And so we're starting to see, rumor is somebody's working on trying to get a Dune experience in this same format. So we're starting to see kind of this, legacy content, evergreen content work its way into this large-scale free roam virtual reality experiences. And I think you can do that in smaller spaces. You could do that in 2,500 square feet and put it in a theater if you ripped out the chairs and leveled the floors. And so that's the thing that I'm really the most excited about, because it costs over $1 million to put in a small IMAX cinema in a theater. But if for a couple $100 grand you could drop a VR experience in there and there was enough of a content pipeline, I think that's something I'm excited to see if it takes place.
Well, it's a great thing because it shows everyone has this misconception that virtual reality headsets are not scalable, and they absolutely are scalable. Thinking about that idea of scalability and looking at what we're talking about now with Horizons of Khufu or other similar LBE VR experiences, it's super exciting because yes, it can be scaled relatively easily at relatively low cost to allow those economics to work. And that's not the only reason I'm excited about it. I'm also excited because it gets headsets on people and it gets them used to the medium of virtual reality headsets without them having to fiddle with and work it out themselves. And I think that can only be a positive thing when we think about mainstream adoption of this technology.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's still early, right? I think the younger generation now, not so much some of our ages anyway, are really inclined to put on a headset to start with. But kids growing up with this technology, it's second nature to them.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends have kids that have VR headsets. Typically it's mostly the Meta, the Quest or something. But they have something and they're used to it already. So it's not a foreign object that they have to put on their head.
Yeah.
It is, or has been the last several years to most people, that are older than 30 or 40 years old. So I think the adoption of that, along with, as Bob mentioned, just the technology in headsets, standalone chipsets, the optics, everything else, comfort, you name it, is gotten so much better and getting better, and the price points are starting to come down as well. So you take all these variables into play, and I think we're just kind of like getting launched, right? I think just as the younger generation gets older, and they're already it's like having a mobile phone. We didn't have that growing up,
Yeah.
but these kids these days that's second nature to them, and I think the headsets will become second nature, and they're getting lighter, better, faster.
I think there's something else with the younger generation too when it comes to movie theaters, and we've seen some of this with movies like Wicked and Minecraft movie, where they want to go out and make this a social experience, right? They don't want to. So movies, if you go to CinemaCon, you hear it's a shared experience. Turn off your phone, don't fucking talk. Like, be quiet for 2.5 hours, and then you can talk in the car about the movie when you're done. And I think the thing that virtual reality allows you to do, I'm going to go, when we're in Vegas, we're also going to do the new Felix and Paul Interstellar Arc, and I've seen some clips of that, and every person's avatar has a photorealistic version of your face in the suit, and so I see who you are, and I can interact with you. And I do think that virtual reality allows for more immersive social experiences, even though it has this rap of being isolating in LBE, in an experience, it actually can turn it into a social experience, which we're seeing the younger generations want, because they want to get up and they want to sing along and they want to throw popcorn and throw toilet paper at the wall. And I think that when you look at the younger generations, I think they're absolutely adopting this. And the question is, what's the launch window? Because I've been saying we're 5 years away from mainstream adoption for 10 years. I now have gone the other side. We're never going to have mainstream adoption. This is just a niche display technology with a lot of great use cases. And I don't know where you guys fall on that.
I really hate thinking back over the last 10 to 15 years and how mainstream adoption has always felt so close, just round the corner, but still hasn't gotten here. I don't think I believe it's going to be a niche technology. I think we will achieve that adoption one day, but we can't expect to pull people into the current state of the technology. The technology is going to have to adapt to meet the needs and the requirements of the people. And we're already seeing that with companies like Apple and Meta and many others, Google, Samsung, that are pouring a lot of money into developing more familiar virtual reality, augmented reality, XR technology solutions. Hardware that looks and feels like a pair of glasses that we're already used to putting on. And I think, yes, we will achieve mainstream adoption, but the medium has to change to something we're currently familiar with to get there.
I've always said this, from day one, and I still think it's pertinent today. Is the content is really the driver. I mean, if you have a kick-ass experience that you feel like you're somewhere else out of this world, or just that you can never experience on your own, not only is it going to be great, you want to do it again, you're going to tell 50 other people about it, what a great experience that you had.
Closing question. So if you could have any movie, any classic movie of the last whatever, and you could do it in a large-scale free roam experience, 45 minutes to an hour with, it's kind of social, you go with a group of friends, what would it be?
What's your definition of a classic movie? How far back do you have to go?
You don't have to. It could be in the last 10 years or the last 50 years. I don't care. Just like something that's evergreen, like that, practically you could license and bring into the experience.
Okay.
I don't know why. I just thought, I'm really bad at movie titles and everything else or whatever. But just the vision that I had is like, remember Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid?
Yeah.
And just the chase, and then jumping into the canyon, the river, and just that whole world of cards, the whole thing. I think something on that genre would be one. And I can't think of anything right now, but something that would either like Journey to the Center of the Earth. I think of things that you can't experience yourself. That you or it's impossible to experience.
And I suppose this is not okay. Well, let me answer this in two ways. One, I'm going to draw from one of the movies that I watched as a kid and still have great memories of. I think everyone hates this movie, but I think it's a great movie. It's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner, which I think was released in the early 90s. And I found that so fascinating with all of the different scenes, the White Cliffs of Dover, the Sherwood Forest, the castles, the chases. I think you could have a lot of fun with a movie like that.
Yeah, I was thinking one that I always talk about, and then one you made me think about, Lance, your comment. The original Alien, where you're inside the Nostromo and all you have is like that flamethrower and the little pilot light.
Yeah.
That would just be so terrifying. And then
that's a very good one.
And then Fantastic Voyage with Raquel Welch, where you shrink down into the human body in the submersible, and you go through and have to do microsurgery and stuff like that. I think that would be a really cool title.
I don't know if this was never a movie, but I think it was an old TV series that was made into a new TV series, Westworld.
Oh yeah,
I'm not mistaken, right?
It was a movie.
Yeah.
It was a movie with Yul Brynner made into a TV series on HBO.
Got it. I think that would be really cool.
That would be great. That would be a good one. Yeah, which is HBO, which is Warner. Could happen, right?
Yeah. There we go. If Warner are listening, you know what to do.
Yeah. Cosm, you listening?
Cool. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate the insights. I think we're, like you said, fortunately, unfortunately, we're still in the very beginning of this. But it does seem like the business models are solidifying. People are trying a lot of different things, and some of it seems to be working. And so hopefully we'll continue to see more and more of this, and audiences will keep getting more and more immersed, and people will make.
We continue to move forward, right?
And we continue to move forward. Yeah, and be patient.
Hey, Bob, let me throw a question. Let me repeat a question that we weren't live before we're recording, but and I'm still curious to know, because I cut my teeth in the gaming business, right? The arcade, location-based entertainment spaces, and you're embedded in it so deeply now. How are these guys doing? Are they making money? Are they able to get a return? Is it a viable business?
You mean the location-based VR businesses at the retail level?
Yeah.
Look, I think that the arcades generally are passionate hobbyists that generally buy themselves low-wage jobs and some sense of self-employment or freedom doing something they love to do. That's the best way I could characterize a VR arcade. Some of the bigger stuff that we're seeing now, like Felix and Paul's Immersive Arc, they just opened in Vegas. It's only been a few weeks. We'll see how it does. But Eclipso's opened up probably a dozen of these large-scale free roam, cultural, virtual tourism businesses. Those, at least in Europe, are doing really well. There's thousands of them in China. They're everywhere, as happens sometimes over there. But that model seems to be working really well. And so I think in the cultural art tourism business, in markets where cultural art tourism experiences get traffic, Europe, Asia, doing well. Right. America, jury's still out. Arcades are generally marginal. Sandbox, I just did a deep dive into sandbox economics. And I wrote a blog about that on Inside VR at the VR Collective recently. Kind of digging in. The average sandbox does about 1.5 million in revenue with a 40% EBITDA. That's the corporate stores, which is really good. Franchises, a lot of that top line, 20+% goes up to the franchisor, so it takes the EBITDA down under 20%. But they're on the right side of the technology curve. Right now they use Vicon and marker tracking and PC VR streaming, and over the next 3 to 5 years, my guess is they'll move more to standalone. They'll get rid of they'll go to markerless motion capture. That'll bring the costs down of deployment, which will bring the ROI up. Zero latency is in 165 locations now in 6 continents, so that seems to be working really well. So the high-end VR stuff that can support a $50 ticket price for a 25 or 30-minute experience seems to make money. The problem with the VR arcades is they're still stuck in this 50 cent to $1 a minute range, and they just don't generate enough top-line revenue to really crack through. That's kind of how I would characterize it.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so... Well, I appreciate the time, both you guys. I'll let you know after I get to Sphere and Cosm and Interstellar Arc what I thought, and hopefully our paths cross again in the real life. And until then, we'll continue to be virtual, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Bob.